It's a great day. It's a great day, and yes, I hope you can hear me because we have a parallel track. I hope you can hear me. Yes, it works. Perfect. Very good to see you. Very good to be able to see also Minister Galushenko together with us. And let us start. This is key event for Ukraine, and you are mostly welcome. Thank you very much for sharing your time. Thank you for coming here, and thank you for listening to our most distinguished panelists. I'm really honored. We have crème de la crème speaking about National Energy and Climate Plan for Ukraine. And we start, as with Hitchcock, with the main dish, which is Minister German Galushenko. The floor is yours.
Good morning to everyone, and dear ladies and gentlemen, friends. I wish to be in person to shake your hands and to discuss the issue of today meeting, but unfortunately we are waiting for another waves of Russian attacks to the energy infrastructure. So we are preparing for that. This year we are implementing the biggest repairing campaign ever in the history of Ukraine, and really, with the support of our partners and support of our friends, we did a tremendous job just to repair our energy system, to protect the energy system, passive protection, active protection. So a lot of decisions were implemented during this year, which we sure would allow us to go through this winter under another waves of Russian attacks. And of course, in all our preparation and in all work we did, and we will do this work in the future, of course, we are committed to fighting against the climate change. And very important that, of course, I'm absolutely sure that Ukraine will become a member of the European Union. And that's why everything we did, we took the European rules, we implement the European policies in Ukraine, and we had roadmaps how to integrate the markets, how to reach and to implement the best practices in our energy sphere, in the energy markets. And of course, Ukrainian contribution to European continent should be the achievement of climate neutrality by 2050. And how we can achieve this? In fact, if you look at the energy mix of Ukraine before the full-scale invasion in 2021, more than 60% of electricity produced in Ukraine was carbon neutral. And now you have the report, which is a part of US Net Zero World Initiative, and it was done by Ukrainian specialists, US national laboratories, scientists, experts, and I'm very grateful to everyone who was involved in this job. And we had several scenarios in this report. First is the reference scenario, which show the energy sector development pathway in the post-war recovery of several severe damaged Ukraine. And the scenario shows that the money and investments to recover in the energy sector is limited, and it's hard to cover the necessary needs. And we consider just this scenario just to show the difference between the next scenarios which we really want to implement, that we're sure we will implement. The second scenario is net zero scenario. And this scenario is designed to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emission in the energy sector in the context of the Ukraine membership in the European Union. And finally, the third scenario, which is net zero intense scenario, that is really the relevant scenario, which includes the restoration and development of Ukraine and the Ukraine as an energy hub for Europe. That is what we really want to achieve, and that is a part of our energy strategy, which was adopted this year. And we really see that Ukraine could become and have all necessary possibilities to become the energy hub for Europe. And we already see a lot of things which happened even during the war, which allowed us to fulfill this goal. Just to say that this year, the non-residential companies from mostly EU states starting store gas in Ukrainian gas storages. During the war, with all the risks, they are ready to store the gas, and these figures this year is up to 3 BCM of non-Ukrainian gas in our storages during the winter. And that is really amazing, because it shows that Ukraine has potential, because we really, I mean, it's not only because we have the biggest gas storages in Europe, but that means also the trust, because we really did a lot of job this year to achieve this, because we adopted a new law, we certified the storages in accordance with EU regulations. That's also allowed the companies from Europe to come, and that is a great example how Ukraine could be the energy hub in the future for Europe. Of course, the electrification will be the heart of the decarbonization strategy for the Ukraine economy, and that is very important. That is what is provided in detail in our energy strategy, and that's what we are planning to implement. And of course, at the COP, Ukraine and more than 20 other countries joined the declaration to join efforts to triple the use of nuclear energy in the world. And for us, it's very important, because even with the occupation of Zaporizhzhia NPP, we produce more than 55% of all electricity in Ukraine from nuclear. And of course, talking about nuclear, I cannot raise the issue of Zaporizhzhia NPP. What is happening there? It's really, of course, it's destroy all achievements and everything what the civilized world achieved in development of peaceful nuclear energy. And just to tell you that several days ago, the Zaporizhzhia NPP was 8 times in blackout. 8 times the Zaporizhzhia NPP was in blackout. And very important to understand that we need to speed up in finding the solution. And solution is very simple. It's written in all documents. It's written in General Conference, EIA General Conference resolution that the Russians should withdraw, the troops should withdraw their personnel from nuclear station and allow it to operate it safely by Ukrainian staff. And we raise this issue everywhere, and it's very important to understand that even small accident on Zaporizhzhia NPP could dramatically influence the implementation of the resolution to triple nuclear energy, because it would raise the issue of investment to the sphere in case this accident happens, in case we cannot find the answer how to protect nuclear power plants, so how you could protect your investment. And of course, when we are talking about the new technologies in nuclear sphere, like SMRs, and that is also a part of our strategy of Ukraine to substitute the thermal generation by SMRs. So, but if you cannot answer how to protect one nuclear station, how you could protect 10 SMRs or 100 SMRs, and that is the issue of really future development and the renaissance of nuclear energy. That's why I raise this issue here. I really want us to join around this issue, to raise the level of discussion, to raise the level of pressure to Russia, to push them at least to leave Zaporizhzhia NPP, at least to let us feel safe in the region from the point of view of nuclear safety and security. Coming back to the results of the modeling, it is expected that the power sector is decarbonized and becomes negative in 2040. The building and transport sector will reach zero emission by 2050. And of course, you know, frankly speaking, we want to achieve it earlier. And we really, I absolutely sure that we will do this. And because we see that, I already mentioned that several times, that it's not only the issue of decarbonization, not only the issue of transition, of green transition and net zero goals. For us, that is also the issue of national security, because what we saw during this horrible war in Ukraine, during this horrible attacks to the energy infrastructure, the achievement of net zero initiative and net zero goals would allow us to feel safe in case of possible attacks to the energy infrastructure, in case of future cooperation. And we really want to become, of course, independent in the energy sector, and we want to, as I mentioned, to become a hub and to supply, to strengthen the European energy system. And that is really what we can do. That is really, we have the potential for this. And recently we finalized all necessary criteria for full synchronization of Ukrainian energy system to EU grids. And that is, once again, that is what we are doing during the war. The very important for us is not to stop. And that's what we are doing, not to stop, not to wait until the victory. So we are moving to net zero goals. During the war, we are doing our job. And I'm very grateful to all of you who are with us, who are helping us to model how the net zero initiative would looks like in Ukraine, to all of you who participate in the energy strategy, drafting energy strategy of Ukraine this year. And I'm very happy that we adopted this strategy until 2050. So we show the future. We show that during the war, we are thinking about the future, and we are moving ahead to achieve the goals and to strengthen the Europe by strong Ukraine energy system. Thank you very much.
Minister, thank you very much. Thank you for your words. Thank you for being with us online despite the war. Thank you for sharing your thoughts via video. And we have here, Minister, I can assure you, the most distinguished panel I could ever have imagined, and an excellent discussions that will be following your speech. And I'm honored to have Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič with us today. I'm very, very honored to have Fatih Birol, Director of International Energy Agency, Charles Cormier, representing World Bank, and then Alfonso Garcia Mora from IFC, very nice, and Andrew Forrest from Fortescue Metals Group. And we will be diving into what you started to say, Minister. What does it mean, net zero, and how we as international community can support you in this extremely challenging moment when you are, as you said, doing your job, and we want also to do our job. So my first question would be, in this very crucial moment of history, to Commissioner, dear Maroš, what is Europe doing and what it can bring to Ukraine in this extremely challenging moment?
Thank you very much. And I think you forgot to mention that this panel is chaired by the former president of COP, very known as Michal Kurtika, who actually managed, the good results. And I'm sure that also the current COP would be very pleased if they would have the same success with the final declaration as you managed to negotiate a couple of years ago. First and foremost, dear German Minister, you have really in the room your friends. You have here the expertise. You have here supporters from very important institutions. You have here the representatives of the financial industry, and we wouldn't be here if we wouldn't see how really your people are fighting the aggression and how, on top of it, you managed to transform your country. You would probably recall our long coffee we had in Kiev when we came with the whole College of Commissioners to support you in March. And I can tell you that we've been leaving the train station in Kiev back to Europe with the feeling that these guys are amazing. They are fighting the war, but still the whole government spent with us the whole day going chapter after chapter of your reforms, so what needs to be done simply to be prepared for opening of the negotiations with the European Union. And if it comes to the energy, we very much appreciate your approach, which is under the headline Build Back Better. And we want to help you with that. So it means that you can really benefit from the experience, from the technologies, and also from the support which we are ready to provide you with. And we know that you are already building on that in a great pace in Europe. We are working with you and are always very impressed by the pace of change and reforms and the fact that you managed to establish them. We are very proud that together EU and Germany can be helping you to set up the Ukrainian Climate Office, which was open at the end of October, that you are already developing your national energy and climate plan, which is really putting all these strings together so you can really build on the expertise and the new technology. And the fact that we manage to connect you and Moldova with the European electricity grid, and Michal from his position when he was a deputy minister, he knows how challenging discussions we have, and we've been doing the same from the Baltic countries. So it's a not small feat, and the fact that we managed to do it in such a short period of time is very, very impressive. Maybe last two words. You know that I was visiting Ukraine quite often before the war started, and I was telling you that you could be European superpower if it comes to the critical raw materials. You can be European superpower if it comes to renewable energy, to green hydrogen, because you have all the ingredients in your country to make you very important player if it comes to the future-oriented technologies. So the announcement that one of the biggest wind farm will be built in Ukraine, which was made here in COP at the beginning of the week, is very important. And of course, we will be working with you very closely with our financial support, with our expertise, and also we're supporting, I would say, lots of other expert groups which you would need for this transformation. I met recently very impressive people from Europe, Ukraine Transition Hub, where Ukrainian and German experts are coming together to make sure that they will bring additional expertise to us, to the Commission, to assess the developments in Ukraine, but also back to you to make sure that you can transfer that knowledge, what we kind of gathered when we've been helping new member states like Poland and Slovakia, and we've been joining the EU to be prepared for this huge transformation when you want to be full-fledged EU member. So what I would like to say is it's very symbolic that we are talking here at COP28 because we are talking about the future of the planet, future of energy politics, and I'm very glad that Ukraine is already part of that because in your country it will be very symbolic, and we are charting the future for you, for Europe, and for overall security in our continent. So thank you very much for that. Thanks for the invitation, and the high quality of panel just demonstrates how strong friends strongly support you. Thank you very much, Michal.
Thank you, dear Maros. Just let me one question, because you spoke a lot about what can Ukraine, how can Ukraine benefit from joining EU, becoming hub for new solutions, renewable energy, critical raw materials. But to what extent, you being responsible for Green Deal in Europe, we can also benefit as Europeans, existing 27 member states, from this experience of Ukraine completely changing its energy system?
I think absolutely, because it's done in a remarkable pace. You would recall that when we, for the first time, discussed how can we desynchronize the Ukrainian electricity grid from former Soviet one with the European one. So all the analysts I have on my table been referring to 5 years, 10 years, huge economic costs. And suddenly, you know, war started and we did it in 3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. So if the will is there, if the political support is clear, then you can really do the miracles in a short period of time. And the same goes for the gas supply. Ukraine was traditionally supplied by Russia, but since again many years we've been working very closely with Ukraine on making sure that they can buy the gas on European markets. We build these reverse flow pipes, and now I'm very glad that Ukraine is serving not only her citizens, but also for the first time European companies are storing gas in the biggest Ukrainian gas storages we have, 33 billion cubic meters. It's already working. European companies are there. And I think that if Ukraine can really transform the economy in such a big pace in the middle of war, I think it's a good signal for all the ministers here who are, of course, very much concerned about the challenges which transformation brings, public opinion, costs, budgets, and creating the business case for this. But if Ukraine can do it in the middle of the war in such a short pace, it just proves that it's possible, it's doable, and there is strong business case behind it.
Thank you very much. So that's the inspiration for us, for Europeans. Director General Dir Fatih, you proposed in your last World Energy Outlook a very changing perspective, fossil fuel peaks. And how does this apply to a country which is ravaged by war? How should reconstruction be organized in terms of leapfrogging versus rebuilding the existing? You are the best place to say.
Thank you very much, Michal. Mr. Minister, dear colleagues, thank you very much for inviting us here. You ask a question, what these institutions can give to Ukraine. First of all, I wanted to say, I want to thank Ukraine, what Ukraine gave to IEA by just being there, by what they are doing now in Ukraine on a day-to-day basis. They show us that sometimes the good people can win. So it is very good to know. It gives us a very good morale for other things we are doing. Such a good example is there. So I am very happy that Mr. Minister is here. We are so thankful to Mr. Minister, his government, and the Ukrainian people, what they are giving to us. The other question is you mentioned with the Ukraine joining to maybe EU sometime, hopefully soon. I wanted to say that in a very short period of time, we made sure that the Ukraine joined the International Energy Agency as an associate member in a meeting, the ceremony we organized in Warsaw together with Mr. Minister. I signed the declaration of joining the Ukraine to IEA. So with Ukraine, we work very closely together in two areas, basically. It is in line with what you have just said, dear Mikhail. How we prepare Ukraine for the addressing the climate change issue, being a part of the green energy future. What we are working on the 4 areas. One is the increasing share of renewables. This is one. The second one is the improving energy efficiency. Third one is the reducing the methane emissions. This is an important issue. And the fourth one is the reducing the share of coal in the country. These are the 4 areas. But our main work goes to how we increase the resiliency of the Ukrainian energy system. So looking at the conditions today, geopolitical conditions, and maybe of tomorrow, I think it is not a bad idea to make the Ukrainian electric system more on a distributed way rather than central way in order to reduce the risks. This is one area we are working. Second area we are working is the strengthening of the electricity grids and digitalization of that. And we think as such, it can help the resilience and the security of the system. And third, making sure that the significant amount of stocks for the necessary fuels are there when we need it, when Ukraine needs it. But the most important thing is the closer Ukraine is integrated in the European energy system, European economic system, political system, the better it is. We can increase the resilience through that. And I see this integration of Ukraine to Europe is a significant and the most critical step also for energy security and also addressing the climate challenges. Final word. I started with compliments to Ukraine, but finishing again. The very fact that Mr. Minister is with us here, while he is and his colleagues are every single day, every single hour, trying to address the issue of electricity supply, is there or not, for today or after 3 hours, and at the same time thinking of the 2050 net zero is a big thing, and it requires a big appreciation. It is from me, and I am sure from all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, dear Director General. Thank you, Fatih. Maybe just one last thing, because as you are diving into new technologies, and we are discussing with the National Energy and Climate Plan, and I'm co-chairing a group together with Deputy Prime Minister Sviridенko, as you know, and we are thinking about how to help, how to guide our Ukrainian friends in terms of leapfrogging to new technologies versus rebuilding a system which was working, was not perfect, but okay, it's time versus quality. So how do you see it? Green steel, green hydrogen, how do you see SMRs mentioned by Minister Galushenko in the future of energy mix for Ukraine?
So we have to make a good decision here. Ukraine has no luxury to go for some, I would say, high risk options. I think Ukraine has to play safe. And here it doesn't safe doesn't mean equal to fossil energy. So I believe important, in my view, choice would be small modular reactors. I see the small modular reactors are getting a lot of investment and also support, and nuclear energy. or renewable energy, because Ukraine has a lot of renewable energy, also linked to hydrogen, could be two options, I would say, for Ukraine. But once again, one has to see that these steps that Ukraine will make shouldn't be too adventurous and should be supported, in my view, Europe and the other countries.
Thank you very much again, Director General. Thank you for these words. Thank you. And let me turn right now to you, Charles. From the perspective of World Bank, and you are responsible for infrastructure, we have seen the ambition of net zero presented by Minister. How do you foresee the biggest challenge and how we can overcome it on the path to net zero?
Great. So, dear Minister, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm quite happy to be here. The World Bank has been a strong supporter of the people of Ukraine and the government of Ukraine during this Russian invasion. We actually think that in the short term, we've been focusing, of course, on the impact, and the attacks on civilian infrastructure has been quite shocking. We have been completing a yearly rapid and needs and damage assessment. We're about to issue a third one in January, February, so my numbers are a bit out of date, but just to give you a sense, so I'll come back to your question in a minute, but we have to take into account where the baseline is, right? So the damages in the 20 infrastructure sectors across the economy as of last year were $135 billion, and the reconstruction costs were estimated to be $411 billion, which is 2.6 times the GDP of Ukraine pre-war. And so the numbers now are probably larger. About 11% of those numbers are from the energy sector. So one of the challenges we see is that essentially the demand has collapsed. If I was talking to a colleague earlier, our estimate is that consumption has dropped by about 40%. And the energy utilities, I think as of last year, were in arrears of $300 million per month, right? So there is essentially a debt overhang and a financial sustainability of the sector. So we actually think that the Build Back Better is the way to go. Obviously, these numbers we're talking about requires massive investments from the private sector. I see my colleague here, probably Alfonso, will talk about that. And we actually think that is the right way to go. We'll need to, essentially, one of the challenges will be to redress the sector. I think we've heard some really good solutions today from the minister. One of this is that in order to attract, let's say, revenues into the sector, Ukraine has the potential in long term to be an energy hub, but in the short term, it actually can also sell electricity to Europe once essentially the piece is established. There will be a time for the economy to regrow and to consumption to get reestablished. The short term solution to this financial issues I talked about is essentially trade with Europe. In the long term, we do see that Ukraine has all the natural resources that we've talked about, and essentially, interestingly enough, the long-term prices on energy production will be marginally quite good, and so we do see Ukraine becoming an energy hub in the medium to long term, but in the short term, it will be critical to do that. The other thing I think that will need to happen the day one of reconstruction is to look at improving the governance, looking at procurement rules, making sure that IFIs, the private sector sees value for money, and there's transparency in the decision making, and that, let's say, all of these funds are not directed to a few but available to
what would you see as critical reforms in this regard, Charles?
So critical reform, I think that Ukraine is a very, in the energy sector, was quite a reform-minded country already. So there are reforms underway, but one will be subsidies. During the war, there was a additional social protection given, and so the prices are not market prices, they're actually capped. So this will have to be addressed. And secondly, we think the governance of the sector, meaning you put the right people in the right places in terms of at boards. And thirdly, on procurement, we'll need to update the rules. The rules are quite difficult to manage, and there's a lot of layers, coordination amongst the ministries and so on. So these would be the top three, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you. Excellent presentation. And you mentioned your colleague, Alonso. Alfonso, you are dealing with IFC, so you are actually providing money for reconstruction of Ukraine, or you will be soon. From your perspective, the biggest challenge and how to overcome it.
Okay. Thank you for the question, and thank you, Minister, Deputy Ministers, for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be in this. You said creme de la creme panel. I'm like the black coffee, but but it's great to be here with so much knowledge in this panel. So also good to speak after Charles, because you know, the bank and IFC, we have been working very closely since the beginning, trying to really think what are the policy reforms that could really help us to achieve the green transition and the reconstruction of Ukraine. I think that we have to separate the short term and the medium term. No? What we can do in the short term and what we are doing IFC in the short term, and what we believe could be done in the medium term. And actually, based on the report that we have just published, which what we try to do is based on the World Bank estimations on the reconstruction needs, we try to really assess how much or what percentage of these volumes of these reconstruction needs can come from the private sector. And with reforms and without reforms. So in a scenario without reforms, what could actually come from the private sector? And if we do some reforms, what could be the percentage coming from the private sector? This is a report and a study that we did together with the bank and the government of Ukraine. And actually, I think that it is quite useful, no? Because give us two big data points, in my view. The first one is that the energy sector is the sector that, if we do the necessary reforms, will be the one benefiting more from leveraging more private sector. So the capacity to really attract private capital is huge. And the second one is that this is also the sector that will be more relevant in terms of volumes of that we can mobilize, no? Either with or without reforms. But coming to your question, I mean, at the end of the day, what we tried to do from IFC was in the short term working on things that are feasible, no? That are feasible in the sense of what can we do without investing in fixed assets or expensive assets, as long as the Russian invasion of Ukraine is still there. The first one is the distributed solar generation. No? We are working quite a lot with one specific company. We are already assessing where we could actually base the solutions in Ukraine, something that we have done in other regions, like in Africa and in other places. And we believe that this is one of the fastest growing segments in the energy space, where that Ukraine can benefit big time. No? 40% of the total solar PV installations globally come from this type of solutions. And it also gives access to households that do not have direct access to wholesale markets, etc. No? So this is one thing that we are already working, and we are planning to invest or conclude in the coming months. The second is the captive generation. So thinking how we can use other solutions, like for instance, using agricultural waste to produce biomethane, to really try to, in investments that we do in agricultural firms, how we can use that as a leverage to really change as well and create other sources of energy. No? And the third one is the renewable energy plants. There is a huge potential in Ukraine, as we all know, and we are really trying to assess what are the needs and what we could do, especially on the western side, in the moment that the situation is there. But for that, as I mentioned before, in this report that we tried to establish what are the reforms, 5 reforms very quickly, that in our view, and actually it's not our view, it's a report that we share that we did together with the government and with the bank, and we believe that it sets the right pillars for the day after. No? One is to enable a free price formation for the wholesale market. This will be critical to create and promote competition and support investments. The government has already taken very important decisions, for instance, to increase the price caps, and this will be or goes in the direction. The second is a regulatory framework for renewable energy projects with competitive auctions, with simplified permitting, transparent land allocation processes, etc. So to really create the scenario for the private sector to come in and financing the renewable energy mix. No? Third one is allowing private participation in Ukrenergo. That will be a critical issue as well in terms of and I think that some of the auctions for batteries that have already been announced is precisely the way to go, because it will start attracting the interest of private companies. No? Fourth, allowing private participation in the modernization of district heating systems. This will be important in the moment that we open for competition as well. And the last but not least is introducing the incentives and standards to promote energy efficiency. And here is, Charles mentioned the subsidies that already exist. I really think that globally is not only the case of Ukraine. We really need to have a good assessment of how we are using public finance and subsidies and incentives in the world in the energy mix. Without changing the subsidies mix that we have today, we will never get there. No? And I think that this is a big statement that also applies to Ukraine to some extent. No? And IFC will be ready to invest. We have already invested $1 billion so far. It is true that not in the energy sector, but we are very committed to continue investing in the private sector in Ukraine in these complicated times. No? And thank you to the government for the resilience and to the peoples of Ukraine.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being so precise regarding the 5 reforms. You mentioned governance, subsidies, renewables, obviously, but you mentioned also something which is usually overseen, which is heat. You spoke about heating networks, and I think that we tend too much sometimes to focus on electricity, forgetting that in Ukraine, in this part of our taking into account the climate still, the major part goes to, in terms of payments, goes to heating systems. So we need to make this much more efficient, combined together with energy efficiency of houses and an enormous field for application, and for IFC's presence in Ukraine is open, and we count very much on you, I must tell you, with our high-level advisory group linking needs with donors. So let me go directly to the representative of the private sector, because Charles, you are unique in our coffee. You are the sugar of the coffee. You have plans regarding Ukraine. You want to invest in Ukraine. And Olena told me that you already promised $500 million. So it will be before the end of the panel, or you just need some time for coffee more to?
Luckily, I'm a responsible investor and not irresponsible. Look, I was asked when I came in here, has my commitment to Ukraine waned, or is it still there? And I just looked at the question with complete amazement, and my response was, with every fiber of my being, I support Ukraine. That $500 million commitment was made and is already having a major impact, because it triggered a much, much bigger fund, which I've been able to get going with BlackRock, the Ukrainian Recovery Fund, and I'm looking for the urgency of the multiplier effect in the economy. And that is why we want to put into action the love we have for Ukraine, and most importantly, the people of Ukraine. And the people of Ukraine is its biggest asset. Such a highly educated community, hardworking community, one which has been exploited by corruption. Just have to face squarely into reality when you're making investment decisions. One which has had this overreaching of Russia for decades, and one which has shown the world what courage, what justice, and what history can be changed through a brave and resilient people. And that reflects, if you like, my own history. I've been going to Ukraine since 10, 11 years now. I've lectured in Ukraine, spoken at conferences in Crimea, holidayed in Mariupol. My daughter did work experience and studied in Kiev. And when the tanks rolled over the border in what I see as the most ugly example of little personal leader irrelevancy syndrome, someone who just wants to make a mark at any cost, who feigns to be after Peter the Great, which, if you know history, he wasn't that great at all. He was a butcher. Then I felt immediately that the business community must step up, and that I just said candidly, anyone who continues to invest in Russia, trade with Russia, you have blood on your hands. And I still firmly believe that. Yes, I do believe that we must face into the challenges which face all former Soviet Union countries, which have been corrupted by that despotic regime where people look after themselves. They don't think of the common good. They actually want to get rich so they can get out. That is very much the oligarchs of Russia that we need to wash from the history completely of Ukraine. I would advocate, sir, as a member of the private sector, the early initiatives that Ukraine go cashless as an economy. You're wired up with your very advanced digital economy. You're very educated people. You can be the first major economy to go fully digital, non-cash. And that will strike a real dagger into the heart of the remaining challenge of corruption in Ukraine. I'm not saying corruption in Ukraine is worse than anywhere else. I'm saying when really big investors like us come in, we want to know that we're playing on a level playing field, that those funds aren't going to get corrupted. And when my investment is being levered up by 10, 20, 100, 500 times, which is what I'm looking for from BlackRock, then those funds are going to be protected and, of course, well invested. So just allow me to switch quickly to green. If there's ever an economy which can go green and digital, it's Ukraine. If there's ever an economy which can make a strong contribution to the greening of Europe, to the real zero where Europe must get to, it's Ukraine. And so I am asking simply what President Zelensky said when this investment was announced. He said, Andrew and I agreed we will not replace communist-era rubbish Russian infrastructure. Instead, we will leapfrog to the latest technology. We will take advantage of the fact that what the Russians are and have destroyed can readily be replaced with the latest, most modern, green and digital infrastructure. This innovative initiative will facilitate the world's first green digital economy and the fastest growing economy in Europe, if not the world. And I want to drive people back to history. The Marshall Plan after World War II was a complete and utter early failure because it was delayed. Germany and the Axis powers suffered seriously for years and years before the Western world got off its tail and started to invest in those war-torn economies. And then the rest of those economic miracles are complete history. Now I'm saying, let's not make that mistake. Let's do the Marshall Plan. Let's absolutely do it with generosity, with sound investment, with great ethics, with zero corruption on the horizon, but let's do it instantly. When I've spoken to presidents about this, I've said, we need a head trigger fund. As soon as the war is declared over to the satisfaction of the Ukrainian cabinet, those funds flow. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you for your great words. And let me right now turn to you for questions and answers. We have such a brilliant panelists that it's really worth. You have to both to leave. Yes. Thank you very, very much, Maros. Thank you, Fatih. Yes. So we have questions. Yes, yes, please. Would you be so kind to provide the micro to the questions? Oh, yes. Thank you.
Thank you for these inspiring speeches, and that's great to be here today. My name is Valentin Gvozdy. I'm a chair of supervisory board of Ukrainian state-owned company Ukrhydroenergo. I'm here today with my team, with CEO Igor Sirota, and we happy to hear that you as investors, as business, have a great interest to Ukraine. And today we sit in, you can see this this artificial water on the floor, and you can see this installation, floating house. This is because one of our station was destroyed. That was our station, which was actually exploded. This station belonged to Ukrhydroenergo. Now we lost it. But that's what we have. But we also have a great plans. We are the only state-owned company who have ready to invest projects, and the name of this project is Kaniv power plant. And we actually happy that we have very effective negotiations with the World Bank and other financial institutions, because we are green producer of the energy, and we are second largest producer of the energy in the country. And in the energy mix, we play very important role. So my question to speakers: would you be ready to invest into hydropower generation in Ukraine? Thank you very much.
Who takes this one?
So the answer is yes, of course.
So as you're aware, we're already working with you on a 70 million grant from the Clean Technology Fund that's already going to be implemented to install some battery energy storage and use your facilities as storage. I think that with the challenge we have as financiers is how do we invest during the conflict, because there's of course significant risk to the assets. So we've been focusing on mostly repairs and mostly trying to protect the assets by, we're doing different things. I won't mention too much, but they're actually to protect the assets from attacks. The day after we are ready to work with you to implement the plan, and we do think that Ukrhydroenergo has a huge role to play. Hydropower has a huge role to play in the future energy mix of the country.
Thank you very much. We have other questions. If you would be so kind to help us with the micro. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Ashby. I'm the director of the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. It's one of the Department of Energy's 17 national labs. First of all, PNNL has been working with Ukraine since 2014 on energy resiliency, and we've redoubled those efforts during this time of Russian aggression, as we're just proud of what we're doing to support them. I'm here today talking on behalf of several of the national labs that contributed to the report that Minister Halushenko referenced earlier, and I commend everybody to take a look at the report. Because we're talking about how you're going to invest in these areas. The report lays out a roadmap looking at those three scenarios, including a net zero intensive scenario. And so on behalf of the national labs that participated here, in particular, Argonne National Laboratory, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, and Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, we contributed to that report. We're proud to work with the Ukrainians in developing this roadmap for their future. We're keen to continue working on that. This is a commitment we made in Seattle in August to the minister when we met with the first Net Zero World Initiative ministerial. And in just that short period of time, we've already produced this report. And so I encourage you to take a look at that, understand how you can line up your investments and policies behind that, because there is a roadmap for Ukrainian future. And the U.S. national laboratories and the U.S. Department of Energy are proud to be supporting Ukraine in those efforts. So thank you very much.
So thank you. Thanks a lot for your very interesting interventions. My name is Noa Eltine. I am a senior urban resilience and climate adaptation expert from ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability. And we are also the LGMA focal point for the UN climate negotiations. My question is regarding the point that both Charles and Afonso you touched upon, which is the private sector engagement. And coming from the perspective of local governments and also addressing, I represent basically the European Secretariat for ICLEI, and we work directly as well with the European Commission and also directing funds when it comes into the implementation of the Smart Cities mission and as well the adaptation mission. But looking into elements around the fragility and displacement, you've mentioned the demand on energy. So to what extent that is actually reflected when it comes into, the mobility patterns in terms of the movement and also the plans for reconstruction, because we are speaking about building back better. And the other question is as well, the engagement of the private sector. When we speak to local governments, there is one step that we need to take behind when it comes into building capacities for the local governments to be able to put for the private sector bankable projects, investment plans, and then from there go into investments. So to what extent do you think the work that you're doing can help fill the gap? Because we now communicate, for example, with the city of Lviv, looking into their energy investments, but that's always something that has been emphasized. The local Green Deal that Venezia have put in, what does that mean in post-war recovery and sustainable development? Thank you.
Shall I will attempt to answer that question. Thank you for the question. Actually, in terms of the energy demand and energy consumption, Ukraine is an economy that has been large demand from the agricultural sector and large demand from industrial sectors and residential third. In the agricultural sector, it's going to be part of the important part of the economy. There's been a tax, of course, on grain storage and so on, and lots of mines put into the agricultural field. So what we're trying to do now, even during the conflict, is to support farmers with capital grants to be able to let's say plant the next season, so on. So there is efforts to make sure that the agricultural part of the economy is going to be sustained and grow post-conflict. In terms of energy demand, it'll be up to Ukraine to decide whether it reconstructs the cities where they are. There's a huge damage, of course, in the frontline states in the east. Whether cities will be redesigned to be a bit more efficient. We've heard, like the comment from the colleagues saying that Soviet infrastructure was quite inefficient, which is true. So perhaps there's a way to reconstruct cities in a way that's more efficient, and therefore demand would not be as high as we would think. So I think there's a lot of decisions to be made on the Ukrainian side on what type of society they will have, but they need a sustained economy the day after, and they need a sustained economy over time. As they integrate into Europe, they'll be able to also think about export markets of cement, steel, and so on. So I think there's a lot of decisions to be made. So we are working with them on that, but let's say waiting to see how this goes forward.
So I agree that the local capacity is critical and will be absolutely fundamental to strengthen that in the recovery. But we also need to, and one of the things that we try to do with the reform or with the reforms assessment was precisely helping to prioritize, thinking on what will have a bigger impact and what can really mobilize more private capital. Because at the end of the day, if I were a policymaker in Ukraine and I have to take decisions, and given the capacity that I have and the huge amount of needs that I will have, you really need to prioritize. So we will always find gaps of local capacity, no doubt. It's impossible to have all the capacity that is needed to reconstruct what we will have to reconstruct. No? And I think that assessments like the one that we did was precisely trying to say, okay, if we will have to focus, let's focus on this, and then we will sequence the reforms accordingly, no? Because that will be one of the most difficult things, in my view, that we will have to do.
One more question.
Yes, please. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Floor van Dam from the Ukraine Iron and Steel Recovery Platform, working with the Ukraine government, focusing on that sector, which energy is a huge part of. And I had a question on project preparation. So we now have about 40, 50 stakeholders who are quite engaged with this. What certainty do you need from them to actually be able to fund such project preparation funding?
Project preparation funding, Alfonso?
So I couldn't hear very well your question, but
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Better? Sorry. The question was, what do you have project preparation funding available? And what certainty do you need from these industry stakeholders to be able to do that?
Okay. So at the end of the day, yes, we have project preparation funding, I mean, with a limited amount. But I think that there is a lot of interest internationally on helping preparing projects in Ukraine. And there is a lot of interest in investing in Ukraine. And therefore, I don't think it will be a question of lacking funding to prepare projects. The key thing is, when is the right moment to start doing that? And when can we really mobilize the blended finance and the concessional finance that will be needed in many cases to attract private investors? Because at the end of the day, that if IFC or EIB or EBRD or whoever decides to invest in Ukraine in an infrastructure or energy solution, if it is just a single MDB investment, you will not solve the problem. You really need to mobilize others. And in order to mobilize others and private capital, you need to have the conditions to do that. So I think that we need to continue thinking on preparing projects, thinking on and preparing projects, thinking on the reforms and doing the reforms that are needed. And then in due time, we will be able to invest when the conditions are there. No, but I don't think we can stop. We should not wait until the invasion is over to start preparing. No, so.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you for this session of questions and answers. Thank you for being with us for the first panel. Then we have 10 minutes break. And we will start with Minister of Environment, with Deputy Minister of Economy, and moving forward to our second panel in 10 minutes. So 11:20, okay?